to the July 25th meeting of the Oshkosh Common Council. If the city clerk would please take the roll.
Eslinger,
Here.
Erickson,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Stevenson, Bulow,
Here.
Mughawar,
Here.
Hayes. 2 absent, 5 present.
Next up, we'll have Councilmember Eslinger lead us through the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
One moment, please. Thanks.
No problem.
As we gather tonight, we are grateful for the good things that have come to the city. May our decisions always be ones that are for the well-being of all whom we govern.
With liberty and justice for all.
Well, we'll turn it over to Finance Director Van Gompel for a presentation this evening, the ACFR 2022 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report and Audit Presentation.
I'm going to just make a few introductory comments, and then I'll introduce a member from Kerber and Rose who does our audit. But this evening, you should have a copy of the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report for 2022. And that's a report on all our activities through the end of 2022. The important thing to note is if you look at the report, and I apologize for getting it to you this evening, but by the time we got everything back from our auditors and got it printed, it really happened this afternoon. But I called to your attention, there are 2 major components that I would like you to take a look at your leisure. Inside the report, the first thing is called a transmittal letter, and that just kind of gives you a brief overview of the city and the financials. And then there's also a section that's required called Management Discussion and Analysis, or MD&A. And the MD&A talks a little bit about the entire operations of the city. The report itself is presented by and prepared by your finance department. And I would like to thank Haley Palmquist and Julie Kamas. We went through a lot this year. Right about the time the auditors came to start doing their work, we lost our assistant finance director, and we went through, as I mentioned previous at other meetings, we have 2 new finance directors, assistant finance directors, to help us with the process. So once we get all the financial information put together, we actually have an outside auditing firm come in. And this evening, Dave Mensch is from Kerber Rose, and Dave was working on our audit. He's going to have just a short presentation. I told him 5 to 10 minutes, just to give you a high-level overview of the operations. And then if you have any questions, Dave or I could answer your questions. But I'm going to turn it over to Dave at this point just to walk you through the audit component of that. So Dave.
All right, thank you, Russ. My name is Dave Minch. I'm one of the audit shareholders with Kerber Rose, who specialize in governmental accounting. And as Russ mentioned, tonight, just going to go over a high level, kind of the 1,000-foot view of the operating results of the city for the year ended December 31st, 2022. We work very closely with the finance team and Russ here to perform the audit. And as Russ mentioned, everybody worked very hard in preparing for the audit. The audit's a lot of work as it incorporates a lot of one-time-a-year reconciliations and transactions. So everybody worked very hard to help us get this accomplished. The city has a very large set of financial statements. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. So there's a lot to look at. But we'll communicate some of those operating results today. The first page that we'll talk about is the auditor's result summary. There's 3 reports that are issued within this set of financial statements. The first one is the independent auditor's report on the financial statements. Our opinion on the financial statements was an unmodified or clean opinion. Basically, it states that we felt that everything was presented fairly and materially correct. This is the highest level of assurance that we can provide on a set of financial statements. We also issue an internal control over financial reporting and compliance finding. As auditors, we're not required to audit your internal controls, but we need to take them into account while we're planning and performing our audit. And anytime we identify a weakness, we're required to evaluate it to see if it meets the definition of a material weakness, a significant deficiency, or simply another matter. I'm happy to report that we had no internal control over financial reporting findings this year, so a clean report in that regards. And our last report is a compliance report over the major federal and state programs that are required to be tested. Since the city expends over $750,000 in federal funds in a given year, you're required to have a federal single audit and in turn have a Wisconsin state single audit. So I'm happy to report that we found no non-compliance with the major programs that we audited this year. So overall, very clean. The next slide we'll look at is the general fund balance and kind of some trend information here from the last 5 years. So you can see that the overall fund balance has grown pretty significantly within the general fund. For the year ended 2022, we had just over $20 million in total general fund balance. Now, there's a couple components that make up that fund balance. One of them being non-spendable, which means there isn't resources available. It's in a sense already spent. So this consists of things such as inventory or prepaid expenses. There was a small component in there, which is assigned fund balance, and that's really assigned for the subsequent year budget carry forward. So it's things that were budgeted for that got carried forward to the next year. But the largest component to this is the unassigned fund balance, which is really the operating reserves for the general fund and for the city. So at the end of the year, the general fund had about $19.6 million in unassigned fund balance. The next slide has a nice chart here, a nice graph that shows what the percentage of the unassigned fund balance is compared to the general fund expenditures. As I mentioned, the unassigned portion is really meant to cash flow the operations of the city. So you can see a good upward trend here. This means that the city's being really diligent with their spending. So we're all the way up to almost 40% unassigned fund balance compared to your general fund. As auditors, we like to benchmark and compare, unassigned fund balances compared to expenditures, and we typically recommend a range of 25 to 35%. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think it's important for council, especially the new members, to note that long-range finance has established some formal positions on fund balance. Our policy is we want to be greater than 16%. Our maximum's 30, so we're exceeding our maximum policy by a little bit. We can talk about that at budget time, but that's a good point that Dave meant. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. Having that, assigned fund balance over your policy really allows the council some flexibility when it does come time for budgeting. As you know, we're still in a period of inflation, so a lot of other entities are really kicking the capital projects down the road because they don't have the resources available. So the city's in a really great financial position in its general fund. All right, the next slide. This is just a nice graph of your overall total outstanding debt. Your governmental activities, which is all of your governmental funds, has a combined outstanding debt of about $127 million at the end of 2022, whereas your business type or your enterprise funds, all of your utilities are included in there, have outstanding debt of about $241 million. So combined outstanding debt is about $368 million at the city. And the next graph, you might think, wow, this sounds pretty high. But one thing we always look at, is what is the percentage of our debt service expenditures compared to the non-capital general fund expenditures? So you can see you're right about 35%. The general fund expenditures were about 49 million, whereas your debt service expenses were 17 million. And there really isn't a right or wrong answer, whether you're too high, too low. It's really what's the needs of the cities and how do we manage those resources. But I think you can see by the general fund unassigned fund balance that overall the financial health of the city is very strong. All right. The next slide, we always like to point out what your water utility rate of return is. The blue line is what the authorized rate of return is from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, and the red line is what the actual rate of return is. So we're a little bit below the authorized rate, but I think as most of you are aware that there was new rates put in place this year. So, we're going to have half a year rates, the new rates coming in this year. So I would think, for the most part, 2024, we'd see that line inch back up towards the authorized rate. So, but overall, the water utility is still in great position going forward. And then the last slide that I just want to make you aware of is there is a new upcoming GASB statement that takes effect this year. And we'll work with Russ and the team to make sure that we implement that so that the city stays in compliance with governmental accounting standards. But I do just want to note that this year, Russ and his team have decided to submit the annual comprehensive financial statements to the GFOA Certificate of Achievement Program. And that is a program where the Government Finance Officers Association goes through and evaluates the financial statements of the city. And if you present everything in accordance with standards, you receive a certificate of excellence of reporting that you'll be able to present in your financial statements next year. So we went through the checklist with Russ and the team, and we're pretty confident that the city should obtain that certificate next year. So that, is why there's so many pages in the annual comprehensive financial report, because there's a lot of statistical information and forecasted information that's presented in there. So, does anybody have any questions for me? All right, well, if anything comes up, feel free to contact me at my email or get a hold of Russ, and we'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Next up, we move to citizen statements to council. We have a few people registered. Looks like first up would be Mr. Kevin McGee, followed by Terry Schrader.
Kevin McGee, 1244 Wisconsin Street. By my address, you might realize that I was one of the people that you imposed a street assessment on last month, and you'll be happy to hear I'm not here to complain about that. Rather, I understand that a number of you expressed some reservations about having street assessments. It's a sentiment I agree with. I was involved in an effort 20-some years ago to try to eliminate them, and that did not get the required 4 votes. So I would encourage you to try to get rid of the street assessments, but I want you to be aware of 2 issues that brings up and suggest 2 ways of handling those issues. One issue, for the people on my street, the street assessment that we're encountering this year works out to roughly 3 or 4 years worth of property taxes on top of the regular property tax bill all at once. And that is a big chunk for a lot of people to handle. If you get rid of that, well, if you think of 3 or 4 property taxes happening once every 50 years, well, to replace that, you'd have to roughly raise the property tax rate about 7%. Now that's a, rough calculation. I'm sure staff can give you a better number, but 7% would be a pretty big jump, and I'm sure that if you did that, you would hear about it from various and sundry citizens. So it's kind of hard to get rid of it all at once. And secondly, it'd be kind of unfair to get rid of it all at once. I and my neighbors and other people who are having their streets done this year are going to get this big bill come January. Well, if in this fall you voted to get rid of the street assessment program and raise the property taxes, well, we would get this big bill plus a 7% higher property tax bill. Just so the lucky schmucks next year don't get the big bill, right? And so that would be rather unfair to us and to all the other people who in the past 5-10 years have had to fork out 8, 10, 12, 14,000, whatever the amount of money they had. So I don't think you want to get rid of it all at once, but I do think you want to get rid of it. And so 2 suggestions. One, you freeze the level, basically create a cap that you hold constant over time. For me, my assessments somewhere around $11,000. That's on 50 foot of frontage, so that's about $220 a foot. If you put a cap at, say, $200 a foot, and then froze that so that over time, as other prices go up, if that stayed constant, gradually the impact of this assessment would get smaller and smaller. So that would be a step that you could take. But it would take more than any of our lifetimes to get to a point where that's really small. So I would suggest a second step. You impose this $200 freeze for next year, and then each year after that, and this could be set up by resolution to be automatic, it goes down some amount. So if it went down $4 a year from 200 to 196 to 192, et cetera, it would take 50 years, but you would get rid of it. If it went down $5 a year, it would take 40 years. But at the end, somebody would see, I would not live to either one of those, but somebody would enjoy not having these enormous assessments thrown at them. So I would suggest you have staff look at something of this nature, some kind of freeze that gradually diminishes over time, so that we don't have these, five-figure bills all of a sudden thrown at us once in a long while. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Next up, Terry Schrader. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. Probably going to take a little more than 5 minutes. I'm supposed to let you know that, I guess, Mr. Lola.
I got you.
Terry Schrader from 1010 Ballman Street. Just get the council up to speed quick, and you guys live down on Ballman Street. There's a huge project going on with all the rebuild down there. I want to say that my wife and I have gone through and seen how the city treats the taxpayers. My residence is located on the west side, involved with the Arthur, Tyler, Coolidge, and Ballman Street rebuild project. I have had numerous issues with the city utilities during this project and want to let the city council know and Mr. Roloff how these issues and how the city tells its taxpayers to deal with them. In April, the water service was getting replaced in and around our neighborhood. As that was going on, I had shower heads getting clogged up with debris, dirt, sand, in which I had to remove them and clean them out. No big deal, it happens. You get a little dirt in a pipe and I end up with it. The next thing, I have foamy, frothy water. Called somebody over from the city on the project, because the city's got people all day around on the project. Had them look at it. They called the water department to come to my house and take a look. They could not figure it out at the time. They were in talk with PTS, who's a contractor, but decided to place my water meter, give me 4 days of free water, and told me to run a lot of water through the system. The next thing I know, my shower control stops working properly. I have a large walk-in shower with a computer-controlled sets, and you can set temperature, pressure, nozzles, whatever you want. All of a sudden, half of that quits working. I have a plumber come over, check it out, had to replace the unit. Talking with the city people on the job, city has no responsibility. It's not their fault. It broke. How are you going to prove the city did it? That all happened in April, May time. Moving ahead to June, I had issues with my air conditioning. The HVAC guys are down in the basement. Let me know that the 4-inch drain near the furnace had toilet paper in it. Well, I know that's not right. I'm upstairs thinking about it. Meanwhile, my wife's taking a shower, and all of a sudden she calls me in, the toilets are gurgling. I look in the house and think, now I know what's going on. Shut the shower off, stop. Go down the basement, yep, I got sewage everywhere in my basement. So the 4-inch floor drain now that had toilet paper has 4 inches of solid poop getting forced up out of the floor, just like sausage. I called Flush to come over and auger out the sewer line. Now mind you, we just built 10 years ago, never had a problem, no tree roots or anything like that. Flush said he cannot remove the cleanout cap as there is so much pressure on it, it's gonna blow raw sewage into the basement worse. So I make a call to Matt at CPR to have them come down with vacuums, get ready to suck up waste when they pull the cap. Then clean the basement and spray it antimicrobial and all that when it's all done. I also reach out to the city crew on the site and tell them what's happening, but no help, no direction. It's my issue. Flush runs the auger down, they get out 95 feet near the road and hit solid. I go talk to PTS that morning, get them involved and say, hey, you guys hit, crushed, or did something with my sewer pipe. It's plugged. They don't have time to work on it. They can't look at it. So they said maybe the directional borers did it, because I had directional boring that went on also. I tell Flush this. He runs a smaller bit down, says not directional boring. He says if the bit, his bit hits a directional bore, it'll burn the tips off and it'll come back with mud on it. He says when he puts this down, it's shiny, shined up bit. It's gravel, he says. I've done this too many years. That afternoon, I go tell PTS, it's gravel. You guys crush the pipe, hit the pipe, something, you know? Just come down with a hydro hose, dig down, pull it up, put a 4-feet piece of pipe in with a couple fern coats and be done. And if they dig it, I can go down and do it. I mean, I know what's happening, just get it done. Again, nothing. They said, I gotta get somebody in there and prove that they hit it. So, I called Chris at Wallachman Excavating to dig it up. Because I know Chris, he's the one that installed my laterals, dug my base and put it in. I know he's bonded with the city and do water work. He's busy, can't do it. I tell him the story. He wants to help me because we're friends. And he said, I'll work my guys overtime that night and I'll be there the next morning and dig it up. He calls an emergency hotline, digger's hotline, gets it, they're there that night yet, located. I hire Flush again to mark the spot. They gotta have an X right where it is with sonar, that so they know right where the plug is. And then he calls the city to get a locate on the water box. Chris comes the next morning, where's the city, where's the water? Don't know, Chris. So another time, the city didn't come out and just mark the box so we could get digging. Chris gets that handled, talks to somebody. Meanwhile, all night, my wife and I, no toilet, no brush your teeth, no shower, you can't do anything. Because if you do anything, it goes in our basement. Digger's hotline, I don't know, that mark. Okay, Chris is there in the morning, looking to see what he gotta do. Gonna bring the hydro hole in to dig it for me. PTS stops over and asks Chris what's going on, this and that. And he says, you can leave now. Now PTS has time to come down and dig it up for him. After I go out and I hire a guy to do it. You know, and he jumps through hoops, works his guys overtime and all this to help me. And then he, go down the road, we'll dig it up now. Didn't have time the day before, so I had toilet through. I just want to say, I was upset at the city, who's ever on a job site, for not making PTS, hey, go down and take care of this taxpayer, this customer. We know something happened, you know, it just didn't plug up on its own. And I just wanted the council to know that, and the city is the how you get happens, how you get treated. They come down, they dig it up, sure enough, they crush it, they put like a 12 or 16 storm drain over a week and a half earlier and hit it with a tooth. They were digging line was below and touched it, travel went in. That was it. It took that long to back up into my house. So I realize with a project of this magnitude, all neighbors bear some extra costs, hardships from it. But come on, this is overboard. My wife and I did receive an insurance payment check for the sewer issue and cleanup. The shower issue, however, is out of pocket, approximately $2,000, which I think is a lot of taxpayer, for a taxpayer to swallow, and the city to say, I don't know if we caused it. And that's it. That's my thing. I had to get it off my shoulders. I'm upset about it. I'm upset that the city doesn't help you dig in and say, yeah, you got an issue here. What, well, PTS saying, you got to prove that we broke the pipe. So at least I have the resources to go out and the knowledge to get people in to help dig. Where's the guy go and get a hydro hole? Where are you going to go get a hydro hole and dig in 8 hours the next day? At least I got friends, I got the knowledge. Where's the common person go that can't afford it? I got to pay cash. I'm writing checks, to pay for all this. Not everybody can afford that. But the city just shrugs its shoulders and walks away and goes home. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention because you're their boss. Because anybody you talk to, no, but not us. So, that's it.
Mr. Schrader, thank you very much for coming tonight and bringing this up and sharing this. City Manager Roloff, is there any way that you can give direction to Public Works staff to at least look into this a little bit and figure out if there was, anywhere we fell short and do our due diligence?
Mr. Robbie's been taking some detailed notes, so I'm guessing this is the first you've heard of it as well.
That's correct.
Yeah, so, Terry, if there's an issue, know that, there are people above our engineer that's on site. So please feel free to call us even if it's, an issue right then and there. We're happy to take a call to help address that issue, and if we can work
Well,
through it.
and like I say, I had the issues, but nobody on site would say, well, call Mr. Robbie. Nobody on site would say, go see Mr. Roloff.
Yeah. Well, I want you to know that you
Where
can
do I
that.
stand on compensation for my water system in my shower? I just gotta eat that now, I'm done, even though all the water issues that I've had. The city's saying, not our fault. No, it works 10 years and all of a sudden you come in and now it don't.
We require all of our contractors to have insurance for this very type of thing.
Yeah.
You could file a claim with the city, we refer it to the contractor, or you can file a claim directly with the contractor. It's really up to your option, but generally, we defer it to the contractor who's required to be responsible for anything. So they'd have to investigate it and everything, find out what the causes were and whatnot, but I certainly regret the experience you had. That's not what this is about, but please feel free to call Mr. Robbie or myself should you encounter anything, and we can connect you with the contractor if necessary.
I had to get it off mine. I appreciate you. We got to get the guys out on the road out there. Because somebody should have went that day and down and made PTS. Hey, go down there and dig that up. Let's get it. It's hours worth of work. That's it. Bring the hydro hose down, dig it up, put a piece of pipe in with 2 furnaces. I could have a bathroom that night and a shower. But no, we didn't have time. So, and that's where I think the city fell short. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schrader.
Thank you, Terry.
Next up, we have consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are those of routine administrative nature that are voted on by the council on a single roll call vote. Staff recommends approval of all items. Any member of the public or council can request an item be removed from the consent agenda for discussion. I don't have anyone registered for consent agenda, so I'll take a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, if you'll take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson's absent. Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes, absent. Mughawar,
Aye.
carried 5.
Next up, we move to number 24, ordinance 23-390. Making sure I'm at the right spot. Yep. repeal and recreate Chapter 4, Article 4 pertaining to alcohol beverages, issuance of operator licenses. I'll take a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, when you're ready, take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson absent, Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes absent, Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 5.
Ordinance 23-391, amend various sections of Chapter 30 zoning ordinance pertaining to projecting signs. Take a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson absent, Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes absent, Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 5.
Next up, ordinance 23-392, amend sections 13-10 and 7-13 and create section 7-13.1 of the City Municipal Code pertaining to building plan submissions and reviews and authorize delegation of commercial plan reviews to third-party contractors.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson absent, Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes absent, Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 5.
On the new ordinances, the first two, we don't anticipate any action on this evening. Ordinance 23-393, amend parking regulations on 9th Avenue east of South Main Street. Seeing no one on that. Ordinance 23-394, change yield right-of-way intersections in accordance with traffic flow being reversed on Kentucky and Central Streets. I saw Mr. Collins back there, and I apologize, I didn't give you a heads up, I was gonna invite you up. But if you wouldn't mind coming up and letting the people at home know what we're gonna be doing here, because this is gonna impact some people's traffic flow somewhere on the north side.
Sure, no problem. This is in conjunction with the new Val Phillips Middle School. So some of you were on council, some of you weren't, but like a little over a year ago, as part of the facility study, when they designed the new school, we also had a traffic impact analysis done, or required the school district to have one done. So they had a consultant that did that, and then we brought those recommendations to the Traffic and Parking Board, and then council also agreed with those recommendations. But one of those recommendations was to, if you drive by the new school, it's now on the corner of Nevada and Kentucky. So the plan for the new school traffic flow is Nevada. There's a cutout on the south side of Nevada. That will be where the school bus loading and unloading will be. And then if you take a right then from Nevada on to Kentucky, that will reverse the flow of traffic on Kentucky, and they're going to use Kentucky then in front of the school for the parent drop off and pickup. And then there'll be no parking obviously on the other side. We'll be bringing forward to the Transportation Committee and then to council in the next month some changes then for the parking and loading zones, because we're going to have to redo the ordinances on Kentucky in conjunction with that as well. So the flow on Kentucky will reverse, and then in conjunction with that, the traffic flow on Central will also be reversed, so traffic will be then flowing north on Central and south on Kentucky. It's going to be a little challenging the first year with the middle school and the elementary school operating, so there'll be some adjustments that we'll have to do after this year. However, we've been meeting with the school district's facilities department and the police department to kind of go over these changes, and they're going to have a presence out there obviously for the first week of school or so. We're planning on reversing the one-ways probably around the second week of August, so it'll give people a chance to adjust to it before the first day of school. Right now I'm looking at renting some digital message boards and getting some signage up there, a week in advance that the traffic pattern is going to be changing, and then also getting some arrows to direct that traffic, at least for the first couple of weeks. So that's it in a nutshell.
Appreciate the update.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you. Next up, ordinance 23-395, approves zone change from heavy industrial district, HI, to business park district with a planned development overlay at property located at 2850 Universal Street. Plan Commission recommends approval, and applicant requests waiving the rules and adopting on first reading. We do have someone registered to speak on this, Ms. Angela Wade, if you'd like, come on up. Good evening.
Hi there, I'm Angela Wade. I'm here on behalf of Trio Young Scholars. We're the school that is operating at 2850 Universal and looking at moving the building, or not moving the building, moving the school classroom to our four-car garage. We operated in our first year last year. We are the first and only school specific to kids with autism in Oshkosh and in the Fox Valley, actually. We had 7 kids in our school last year, and all of them gladly surpassed what our expectations and what our hopes were for them in their first year. So we wanted to be able to do the special needs scholarship program through DPI, which is very similar to Parent Choice. So they essentially would be able to receive a voucher to attend our school, which would help our finances because we are a nonprofit, and allow actually any child with an IEP to attend. Once we started to enroll, we realized, hey, there's additional requirements as far as building, and that required a rezoning. All of this new information sort of came within the last 5 months, so I'm asking the council if they can waive the second reading in order for us to start construction, hopefully tomorrow, or as soon as the building plans are approved, to hopefully have the kids in their new location by the start of school in September. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, is there a motion and a second to waive the rules and adopt on first reading?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on waiving the rules? Please take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson absent, Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes absent, Mughawar,
Aye.
carried 5.
So back to the full ordinance 23-395. I'll take a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilmember Bulow.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to say that this issue came up to my attention about a month and a half ago, and I really want to thank city staff for working with Trio Academy to come up with this creative solution to make sure that that school stays open and operational.
No other discussion? If you'll take the roll on ordinance 23-395.
392.
Esslinger,
Aye. Oh, no.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Mughawar,
Aye.
carried 5.
Next up, we have a pending resolution. This was laid over from the May 23rd meeting. Resolution 23-396, laid over from May 23rd, 2023 meeting. Utilize Unity in Community funds for sponsorship of teams for the Northeastern Wisconsin Dragon Boat Race Festival on September 16th, 2023. DEI committee recommends approval. Don't have anyone registered. Did you want to speak to this? Okay. I'll take a motion and a second to
So
put it on the
moved.
floor.
Second?
Discussion. Deputy Mayor Erickson.
Thanks. I'll kick it off. I just first want to say thank you to the organizers for doing this event. I think this takes a lot of work in bringing this back to Oshkosh. And I know, we're discussing using Unity and community funds to kind of repurpose into this sort of continuation. So if you could just kind of speak to or give an overview of kind of the purpose of the event, what you're hoping to accomplish.
Before you do that, just for procedural, if you're going to speak, can you give name and address? Thank you.
Angie Lee, 1120 Baldwin Avenue.
And Anne Marie Johnson, 1014 East Irving.
Thank you.
So as far as an overview, this is an event which the objective is to celebrate the diverse communities in this region, to welcome and to increase social belonging or social connectedness and belonging. It's to boost our local economy and encourage vendors from marginalized communities to promote and ultimately become a destination event for our region.
Thank you.
Any others? Councilmember Ford?
So the specific request is for, there's $5,000 in this fund, correct? Can you give can you get, excuse me, can you give an overview of how that would be used or what you're hoping to do with it? Yeah.
The suggestion from the DEI committee, which, by the way, I am a member of the
Okay.
DEI committee, that committee recommended that the money be put specifically towards funding 4-ish teams. It depended on the exact amount that we were given. It's about $1,000. It's a $1,000 registration fee for what we call community teams, which are any nonprofit, governmental associated, higher education groups, and other groups like that that aren't corporate sponsored and aren't just a group of friends getting together. And so that's what the DEI committee had recommended that the funds be put towards as a way to help essentially particularly marginalized groups or groups, for instance, like police or firefighters, as a way that they wouldn't have to come up with the money themselves for the registration fee, but it could be sponsored.
Thank you.
Councilmember Esslinger.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess maybe a question or two for Mr. Roloff and then the ladies. Mr. Roloff, correct me if I'm wrong, but does the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department hold jurisdiction over the river?
Yeah, in the water areas, they would, and they were at a recent meeting that we had. So they're aware of the event. That's all I can tell you, but I'm not sure what follow-up you've done with, but yeah, the sheriff's department's aware of it, and it is their jurisdiction.
Okay, then I guess a question for the ladies then. I don't see it, I've got a spreadsheet of numbers on here. Have you been in contact with the sheriff's department and any fees associated with that, and do they have any issues?
Yes, specifically, I contacted, is it Tim Eichmann who was with the sheriff? I've talked to so many people, I wasn't sure which one was with which organization. And he assured us there are no fees associated with it on their behalf. We also contacted the U.S. Coast Guard because they also have jurisdiction over the waterways, applied for a permit, and we're told that a permit is not needed. And even if there was, I don't think there was a fee associated with that permit. So there aren't any fees for using the waterway.
Okay. I'm looking at your estimated program revenue. Now, some of this stuff isn't, you're clearly not going to get that until the day of the event, the alcohol sales and merchandise sales. I am looking at the fees that you're charging, the fees for the Dragon Boat, and there's status, there's nothing here. So could you give maybe a up-to-date, have you paid any of these, where the fees, or have you gotten, where are you at as far as whoever's going to be in the boat races and paying their fee for the various boats and activities and supplies or whatever that come along with that?
Yeah, so the Dragon Boat Company is charging about $35,000, and that includes rental. It includes hiring of staff to be steerspeople and marshals, and it also includes hotel stay and travel fees. So that's that's kind of an overall budget being paid just to the Dragon Boat Company. As we start receiving registrations, some of those fees will be recouped. But that's why we don't have anything as far as a total. We just have a current budget or status for the fees for the Dragon Boat Company.
And how many boats there's just 30 boats, or?
Our goal was to have about 48 teams.
Oh, okay, all right. And so where are you, how many teams have paid their fees for their particular boats?
We have about 15 teams right now as of today that have showed interest and or committed or have said that they're working on building a team.
15?
Yes. However, the registration fees are not due until August 15th because we needed to give people enough time to, as I said, the average is $1,000. It depends, again, on what type of team it is, and that takes a while for people to come up with.
So if it's August 15th and you have 20 applicants that pay, is that kind of throwing in the towel then, or do you still proceed? How do you justify that?
Yeah, so we've created a kind of a separate budget if, like, kind of with these contingencies, like if, let's say, we only have 24 registered teams and kind of have adjusted our budget depending on those contingencies? Because from my understanding, a lot of people have an interest but have not completed their registration yet, and so we do have some of those contingency plans in place
And what are those plans?
to adjust our contract with the Dragon Boat Company. So originally, at 48 teams, we would contract 8 rental, or 8 boats. But if, let's say, we get 24 teams, then we'd reduce that to 4 boats and would have to obviously accommodate the schedule and modify that. But we do have some of those contingencies in place.
Okay, that's all I have for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Go right ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. Just a question. So when this resolution first came up, I was somewhat concerned about restricting these funds only for the use of sponsorship of teams. I'm curious your thoughts. Does that restrict you in any way? How would you use these funds if it weren't restricted towards sponsorship of teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we originally requested those funds, it was towards general expenses. That was rejected, and so the DEI committee then went back and discussed how these funds could be used in a more equitable, or, that aligns with our ordinance, and that's how we came up with the boat sponsorships, thinking that through the participation of the Dragon Boat teams, that would build social connectedness, tie back into our mission, and so that's how we, as a committee, came up and ultimately voted and recommended the boat sponsorships, because we thought that would be a wise way of spending the Unity and Community Funds. I think there was a little bit of confusion as to requiring city officials or city staff to participate, and that was never the intention. So I want to clarify that was, that we're not asking for, police, for example, to mandate them to participate in a race. It was just a gesture of, like, that would be great if we had some city teams, but that was never something to impose. I think at this point, if we wanted to use the Unity and Community Funds towards general expenses, then we have a little more leeway and flexibility, and that would probably help our budget. So, but the DEI committee did recommend towards boat sponsorships, but if you wanted to amend that, we would be supportive of that.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, so is it fair to say the committee made that recommendation as a way to make sure that folks who can't afford
Yes.
to be on a team have access to a team if they want to participate?
Yes.
And that strikes me as being consistent with the mission of an event designed to promote unity.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bulow.
I just wanted to clarify that if we did vote to change those to general funds, that they'd still be available for sponsorships if somebody needed, correct? The $5,000 that's going towards sponsorships right now, if we voted to change that to general funds, you could still use that towards the sponsorship if you needed.
We could, yes.
I also want to make the point that it was always the intention to replenish that Unity and Community Funds after the event. So whatever we would accept, we would replenish towards a future event, whether that is Dragon Boat Festival or another community event that,
The DEI committee is one of our, I don't know if it's a specific goal, I think it's one of our specific goals, is to support the event.
I have a question actually on something you just mentioned, replenishing the fund. And I guess, let me take a step back. I know for those at home, it may seem a little awkward what's happening here. You're asking for city funds. Some of the questions can be a little bit probing and even intrusive a little bit, but it's because you're asking for city funds. So
We understand.
just want to make sure that that's also said, for the record too. But in terms of replenishing the fund, is it your intention that we'd be first position? Because looking at your balance sheet, that the proposed budget, revenue and expenses, returning the funds is first, and then giving funds to was it Northeast Wisconsin Chinese Association, and then Oshkosh Area School District Education Fund?
yes.
So, but Union and Community would be first position in terms of if you had funds available, that would be replenished first.
Correct, because As far as the Northeast Wisconsin Chinese Association, they are the co-host. And we have talked with Teresa Duran at the OASD community, or the Education Fund, and asked that these some of the proceeds go towards cultural programming specifically.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Floor is yours.
I think, given kind of your responses and to offer some flexibility, given that, that it's been a few years for this event to come back, and I think I would like to amend to allow for some more flexibility for these funds to go towards general expenses, which could also include sponsorship of teams. So I'm going to offer an amendment to remove the word teams from the resolution. So I think it would read, utilize unity and community funds for sponsorship of the Northeast Wisconsin Dragon Boat Race Festival on September 16th, 2023.
I would second that.
Okay. Motion and a second to amend to remove the words teams for, I think is, and so it leaves it sponsorship of the Northeast Wisconsin Dragon Boat Festival. Discussion on the motion to amend. Councilmember Ford.
Just a quick question. So people that don't have access, sorry, I'm hung up on this idea that people that don't have money for this can still participate. Even with this change, you still feel comfortable that folks will be able to access a team if they don't have the ability to pay for it?
We'd have to probably ask the others on the committee, but I think Angie and I are both positive that we would do at least one team sponsorship with the monies.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I mean, that was our intent, from the beginning, but given our constraints, we'll have to, kind of based on what kind of funding we're able to receive in the next month. But that is our intention, is to provide access for those who are facing financial barriers to be able to participate without that additional burden.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none, if the clerk will take the roll on the motion to amend.
Motion to amend. Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Muglebauer,
Aye.
carried 5 to amend.
Back to the full motion as amended. Any further discussion on it? Councilman Bresslinger.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Roloff, the funds that are, just correct me if I'm wrong here, the funds that want to be removed, now those are not tax dollars, is that correct?
That is correct. These are the proceeds from the former Unity and Community event. That's why you keep hearing us talk about that. But I double-checked the funds so that it was accurate, and I etched in memory now, because I think Deputy Mayor Erickson was the last one to ask me. We have $4,649.42. I know exactly how much is in there. So, yeah, it's there.
So is there any, if this thing completely blows up and comes unwound, is there any financial loss for the city at all?
I don't believe so, but I think it's a fair question. What plans are you making to mitigate that? Obviously, the $4,600 plus dollars would go to the general purposes of the event. And I don't think I don't have any qualms with that. That's probably more flexible for us in terms of cutting a check as well, rather than auditing which events or which group got which sponsorship. But I guess it's a fair question, Angie or Anne Marie, how you're going to avoid having a deficit even with the city support.
Yeah, I think we're looking into some other creative ways of funding, such as crowdfunding and specific sponsorships to go specifically towards certain expenses. For example, like if we were to find a stage sponsor versus just asking a company for sponsorship, we're going to be creative about some of the way we're going to crowdfund some of this. And so we're just trying to think creatively about how to, because it's, we went from a $100,000 budget originally, and that was months and months ago when we originally created a detailed budget, but based on kind of the community's response, we've adjusted and, and we'll continue to adjust as the event gets closer.
Thank you.
If there's no other discussion. I don't know what the right use of these funds is, but I just don't think that this is the right use of these funds in this manner. So I won't be supporting the resolution that's on the floor in front of us. So if there's no other discussion,
Mayor McGuire, what do you see as the appropriate use of unity and community funds, if I may ask?
I just don't think that this is the right use or the intended use from the unity and community event. I think this is a private event. The
It's a
original
city-sponsored event.
The original event, and I'm not going to get into a back and forth on this one, but it's just not, and I just don't think it's the right use. Like I said, I don't know what the right use is. I just don't think this one is. So with that, if you'll please take the roll.
As full amended, Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Mughawar,
No.
carried 4.
Thank you very much. On to new resolutions. Looks like 397 was withdrawn. On to resolution 23-398, approved general development plan and specific implementation plan for multifamily development on the east side of Oregon Street, south of West Ripple Ave. Plan Commission recommends approval. We do have a few people registered on this one. First up is, I believe, Dennis Hughes, followed by Wanda Burholtz. Welcome.
Hello, I got a little laryngitis tonight, so excuse me. My name is Dennis Hughes. I live at 4046 Oregon Street, Oshkosh, Township of Black Wolf. I'm here tonight. We had a last meeting, was June 20th, with the Planning Commission, and they had a map. They're building these condos behind our house. There's 5 of us property owners, or 6 of us, that the land adjoins, rather. We do have a couple other people that were here, one left already. But we were at the last Planning Commission, and they gave us a map, and they showed how they wanted to, well, they're tearing the woods down, first of all. They've been tearing that wood down since last fall, I believe, into the winter. They leave it for a couple months, and they don't know what they're cutting down. Now I understand today they are starting to cut some more wood down to the south of me. At the last meeting, we would like to see, in the neighbors I've talked to, first of all, the developer wants to put up a berm. They come in on, I don't know if you're familiar with the new condos out there, but they come in from the roadside, they want to put a fence up there, and they want to continue on with a berm, and then they want to, at the far end, they want to put another fence. So we got a berm up in between, like 4 houses, or 4 properties. They started off with like a 5-foot berm. Now, after the last meeting, now they've got it up to a 6 or 7-foot berm. They did give us 2 more feet. They went up from a 6-foot fence to an 8-foot fence. We would like to see a fence from the start to the finish. And I talked to the other landowners that couldn't come tonight, and they are in favor of that also. I do have a map. I don't know if you've got maps of the site. It shows how the berm is. You got a map? And so it would be just a continuation from the fence that comes in off of Oregon Street, because they do have a fence detailed for that. And then you can see where the berm is. And then the berm continues down around, and then they've got a fence down at the end of that berm. We would like to see it right on the property line. It's privacy, that's what we're looking for, privacy. You get people, the condos itself aren't going to be far from our houses. and I think it's 133 feet from the lot line to the first condo, and then our lots are in between. So it gives us more privacy if we would have it on the line. We can do what we want on our side. If we got a nice 8-foot fence, put up our shrubbery and do our lawn work, what do we want to do? If they put up a berm, first of all, my particular lot, there's a driveway that goes right in from the garages, and the lights go right into my whole side of the house where I got all my bedrooms. And they said, well, they put up a 5-foot berm, so they went up 7 foot. Well, the lights still aren't going to stop that. 8-foot fence helps better. So I don't know who decides that. I was up at the city hall the other day talking to one of the fellows, and I can't get an answer of who's the person that's actually deciding. I found out one guy's name, and he's supposed to be the builder. He hires the woodcutters, he hires, I guess, the landscapers, and he's doing all the hiring, but I can't get an answer on that or not. To talk to him and say, why can't we get up a fence? And I know on this approval tonight, it does say that the Plan Commission recommends approval. And if it's approval on this last plan that we got, I'm not in favor of that. I'd like to see the 8-foot fence all the way around. I talked to the Township of Black Wolf today, and they said that it's, the city, that city property, I guess if they can put a developer puts a fence up, and if it goes to an 8-foot, that's a recommendation, that's fine. Township of Black Wolf, they don't mind that. It's our privacy, that's what we're looking for. Right now, the way that berm is, we haven't had them woodcutters back for quite a while. We've got trees that are dead. I was just over to my neighbors, two neighbors away. There's probably about 4 trees that are probably 2 foot, 3 foot in diameter that are completely dead. And they're only 25 feet from his house. And they're not going to even cut them down right now, as far as I know, unless they've changed their minds now. But the way they've got that berm set up, there's an old building that's sitting there that belongs to this developer. It was on that land years ago, which my neighbor, they used it, but it isn't his. And that's got to be taken down. That's it would be right in the middle of the berm. So I don't know what they're doing with it. I don't know what the next step is. We haven't heard anything from the Planning Commission. And as far as I know, it goes here, and if your city council approves it, or if they don't approve it, I guess I'd just like to see it, look more into it and see if we can get that 8-foot fence and everything cleared away. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sir, hang on.
I think Councilmember Resslinger may have a question for you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Sir, in reference to the Plan Commission meeting, I was there,
Okay.
as a council rep there, and, the Plan Commission took about a half hour, 45 minutes talking about a 5-foot fence and a 8-foot berm, or 8-foot berm and a 5-foot fence, and, we went over and over and over, and I finally said, look, the folks that live there, I think, should probably have the most input, because it's going to affect them.
Right, I remember that.
Me sitting on my couch is not going to affect me, it's going to affect you and the other people that live there. So at that time, I think the staff, or the Planning Commission directed to the staff to go back and have a meeting with the residents.
We didn't get no meeting.
And they were gonna figure it out.
I've been trying to get a hold of different people, but can't get them.
So right now, this isn't on the floor for a full discussion. If you have a question for him.
Well, my question is, did you have the meeting? And I think I got the answer.
Yeah, we didn't have no meeting. I was looking forward to it, because like I said, we should have some sort of a say. It's our privacy. And there's 6 owners that live along the back of where they're cutting the woods.
Yep. I think there's a staff member here that wants to address it.
Yep, staff did communicate with the developer, and I believe after correspondence, based on input from the Plan Commission meeting. They came together, and the developer did agree to increase the berms and increase the height, and that was the information that was provided to the landowners nearby. So
What landowner?
the developer is going above and beyond what is required by code. This is a planned development, but at the end of the day, we don't have a requirement that we can go back and say, you have to do it this way. So it's up to the council if that's what they want to, if they want to go above and beyond what the plan, the zoning code requires.
Thank you, Ms. Nyforth. We're gonna move on to the next speaker, but once this is back on the floor, is
Hey,
the
can I just say one thing yet?
appropriate time for us to have some back and forth.
I just don't understand why, if they're gonna put fences up on both ends and put a berm in the middle, why they just can't continue on with one fence. You know, they're gonna, if it's a cost factor, he didn't say, but there's gonna be a cost factor for putting up the berm, and then are they gonna put up shrubbery? And then who's gonna come over on the other side of the berm, and they're gonna be on our, like on our side of the berm, which is kind of on our property. We don't have the privacy that way either.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wanda, I believe it's Wanda Burholtz is up next, followed by, actually Keith Burholtz, I think, right after that. Good evening, welcome.
I'm Wanda Burholz. I live at 4078 Oregon Street. If you look at your map, you will see that we are the farthest south piece of parcel that is over a full acre. We have been at every meeting possible for this adventure that we're in for. I'm here to look at every single one of you guys on this board and tell you, I'm not opposed to this. I know that Oshkosh needs to grow, okay? Cities meeting country. They are meeting the requirements needed. We're not denying that. My big thing is I want my privacy. An 8-foot fence on our east side is not really going to do it for us, but we're not going to have a choice in the matter. Because if you look at the map, there's not going to be able to be a berm there. That's a 7-foot berm because our property butts up the closest to that apartment complex. They came in today with equipment and they took out the rest of the remaining trees on our tree line. I shouldn't say our tree line, their tree line. We had a little bit of a buffer, little bit, with some willows, corkscrew willows. Yeah, we're going to get an 8-foot fence. Only half, though. We're only going to get it on the east side. We're going to get the berm on the north side. I do not want that. I want a full fenced in. And I don't want a white picket fence. We're country. We have a lot of trees. White stands out. I'd like a two-tone brown colored vinyl fence. If you go to Community First on Oregon Street, they've got one nice vinyl fence. That's what we'd like to see. I don't think we're asking for much. You know, I'm hearing that they're going to put the berm up. They're going to put a big pipe underneath it to move the water to go down and around and out. Okay, that's why we can't get our berm by us on the east side, is because they're going to be having a ditch in there, which is fine. But we need to, instead of approving this right away, we need to work back and forth a little bit. If they're going to do a berm for the other people, well, they're overextending the capacity already by a 7-foot berm. Yep, got it. No shrubs, though. Nothing. If you look at Fox Valley Technical College, right down the road to the north, you will see that there's 2 houses that were affected when Fox Valley Tech got built. Those people got a berm around it, and they got shrubs around it. Yes, you guys are willing to lower the lighting for us and stuff like that. We greatly appreciate it. But there's a little bit more that's got to take place here. This is going to be the foundation, guys, for when you guys expand out to country more. Let this be the foundation that the city works with the country people to come to a resolution that's a happy one. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Keith Burholz?
Keith Burholz, 4078 Oregon Street. As my wife explained, it is pretty bare back there. We have some pictures on the iPad if you wanted to look at them. And like you say, we understand that it's going to be built, and that's just the way it is. That's progress for our city. But if they would they don't have any greenery, I guess, in that plan, and that would be, to me, an aesthetic value booster for our homes that are there, because otherwise it's going to look sort of crazy. You're going to see the apartments behind it, which I'm sure that it's going to affect our land value. People will say not, but I'm sure that it will at some point. But that would be nice, just if they did some greenery with it. That's going to grow up and block the apartments. I know the fence will sure help, but that's all I guess I have to say. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
And one question though, we didn't have any other meetings. We only had the two, and they were going to come back to us with another meeting, but never had that chance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other public, members of the public registered to speak on this. We'll take a motion and a second.
I walked in late, I didn't get a chance to sign.
Oh. If you'd like to step on up, if you'll give your name and address for the record.
This is from the lady.
Yep, right.
Can you hear me from here, or do I have to get closer?
No, you're good.
Okay.
It'll pick you up.
Good evening, Jared Schmidt, 1250 Centennial Center Boulevard. Apologize for not signing in, I walked in a touch late. Here on behalf of the developer, and just wanted to, thank the city staff for the opportunity to participate in the process to get to this stage. They're excited about the development. This is a continuation of the first phase of development immediately north, developed by a similar entity. A lot of thought, a lot of process. Not going to fully rehash the plan commission discussion that was had. It was in your, I believe it's in your packet. Happy to dialogue on any of those things that got us to this point. But what we look at as a developer and on the development side is that this use in what has been placed here is a permitted use. This use in what is being suggested is low density relative to what code would allow. This use in this plan was specifically shaped and planned around accommodating the neighbors to the west. I will be the first one to say, we will not please every person on everything that they need. But what I look at is building setback 30 feet. We could put a building 30 feet off their property line by code. We're not. 140 feet on building 4, 120 feet on building 6. Those things are multiples of what code requires. When you start talking about buffering and going through the process of trying to protect what was there. Initially, we actually contemplated a fence, though shorter than currently, 30 feet off the property line, to be able to leave some of the trees on the property line. Comments at the meetings we heard was, we want it on our property line. That's fine, we accommodated that. 6-foot fence, we moved it to 8 foot. 5-foot berm, moved it to 7 foot. The developer does not desire to construct an 8-foot berm the entire length. Cost is a factor. Ongoing maintenance is a factor. There's things that go with a fence that are different than a berm. There's topsoil on the property currently. If they can't reutilize that, they have to ship it off. That's a cost. Building a fence is a cost. So what we took a look at and the idea that the developer wanted and what's presented today is a compromise to what was initially requested, going back to our initial open house that was hosted at City Hall for the neighbors, and has been since modified since we went to Plan Commission based on additional comment, and dialogue from the Plan Commission. So our hope and what we're asked is that we're allowed to move forward with this plan, which significantly exceeds the minimum standards of the city. If we want to redistribute some of the trees that we have to have on the site, we'll gladly put them on the berm. We can put native vegetation on the berm, so there's tall grasses, so the 7-foot berm turns to 8. My understanding is that's allowed by code. We're happy to do that if it becomes more natural. But at some point, the resultant is we meet and we well exceed code on building setback, buffering, and screening. And our hope is that we can leave today with an approval to that effect, knowing that there was concessions and there was coordination with the property owners. I don't envision us building a two-tone fence. I don't envision us putting a fence on the whole property line. Ultimately, these property owners have the ability to put their own fences on. We're providing significant buffering. And I'm not saying that's what they need to do, and I'm not saying that. It's just strictly looking at the facts of how we got to where we got, is that the developer has been participatory in this. They have increased it continuously. And we'd hope that that shows tonight. In addition, the property owner mentioned, and what we've worked with staff since Plan Commission was to put a reduced level of lighting. When you look at the site immediately to the north, it's significantly intense from a lighting standpoint. This site would require somewhere on the magnitude of 38 or 39 lights to meet city code of 0.4-foot candles per area. What we tried to do is take what was desired, which was 3 lights to populate the entry along with on-building lights, and then supplement that throughout to now have good light coverage for the parking areas. I believe that was an acceptable method to staff. We ended up with, let's say, 14 or 15 light poles instead of 30, 38, 39. Again, these are things that we've been trying to do to assist with the minimization of the development impact to neighbors. And just really appreciate you hearing that. And again, happy to answer any questions as you get into deliberation, or if there's any other components of the development that I can help with. So thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. I don't think there's anyone else in the public who is here to speak on this, so we'll take a motion and a second to bring it to the floor.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilmember Buell.
My first debate in 7th grade was organic versus inorganic berms, and like, I'm so glad of that now, thinking back to that time. First thing I just want to say is thank you all for coming with a reasonable expectation. Thank you for your patience and knowing that obviously this development is important to the city. So I appreciate that. Gerald, I have a couple questions for you. You can say seating if you want. The maintenance of the entire berm would fall under the condo owners, correct? Like
Would you?
Owners of the development would be responsible for.
If you're going to answer, if
Oh,
you
okay,
actually
sorry.
wouldn't mind. So
Sorry.
that way,
I lied. Get back up.
that way those at home can hear properly. It's recorded well. Thank you.
So the development as a whole will be owned by a single entity, and that entity would be responsible for maintenance of the grounds, including the berm.
Okay, so there'd be no extra like mowing maintenance or anything that expected of the landowners nearby?
Not beyond their property line.
Okay.
Our expectation is that we care for our property, they care for theirs.
Okay, understand. And you said that you would be open to natural vegetation on the berm. Is that something that you already have in the development, or is that something that can be added, or how does that work?
Yeah, so, on the berm, on their side, on both sides, we can do native plantings. That's, perfectly acceptable. I would say the state DOT has a standard prairie mix that gives you some mixture of colors and things. It's a simple mix. We can do something along those lines, or we can customize one if that's a preference. We're open to discussion on that if that is the desires.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Anything else from council?
Mr. Mayor, this
City
is
Mayor?
actually, I'm kind of following up on Councilmember Bulow. Number 6 in the conditions, Kelly, our final landscaping plan shall be reviewed and approved by the Department of Community Development. So you could work with the developer on some of the comments that we've heard from our neighbors to the west. I always get mixed up over there, sorry about that. But because the final landscaping plan is not being approved by council tonight, so that's sort of a to be determined type of thing. So what do you envision with next steps with the landscaping plan.
Yep, certainly. We will take all the comments that we hear today or what council would prefer to see in the landscaping plan, and we'll make sure they're implemented in the final landscaping plan that is approved by staff.
The reason I'm asking that is my experience has been that, especially when you have a multifamily complex next to a single-family residential, I'm oversimplifying it, but, generally, the concern is that a lot spills over, and the natural landscaping might help deter, people from, walking over the berm. Fence, you're not going to walk over a berm. So I don't know if that's even in the realm of the possibility. Sounds like the developer is willing to be creative on that. I don't know how creative our landscaping requirements are, so kind of putting you on the spot, Kelly. But
Yeah, we would allow landscaping on top of the berm, certainly. We want to make sure that whatever landscaping, whatever plant species is planted there can survive on top of that berm, so we'd have to do a little bit more research to ensure that it would be sustainable, but absolutely, we would allow that.
In terms of photometric or lighting plan, during commercial plan reviews, that's part of the whole plan review.
Absolutely.
Is it also part for multifamily residential? And then
Absolutely.
has it already been, I didn't see it in here, so if I missed it, I missed it. And I didn't know if that's already been gone through or when it would be, actually.
It would go through our site plan review process, so that's where we would go over the plan to ensure that it meets code. But we, like the developer said, we've already been working with them to try to decrease it as much as possible, but at the same time meet the code that we have other departments such as police want us to make sure it's a lighted area.
Yep. I appreciate that. That was my only question on if that had already happened. Thank you. Anything else from council? Seeing none, if you'll please take the roll on 23-398.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Muglebauer,
Aye.
carried 5.
Next up, 23-399, approve a general development plan and specific implementation plan for an indoor institutional use at property located at 2850 Universal Street. Plan Commission recommends approval.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Give me 1 second to pull it up. Bye. Just wanted to- No, I have no notes on that one. Go ahead.
If you'll please take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Muglebauer,
Aye.
carried 5.
Resolution 23-400, approve land disposition of vacant property, 500 block of West South Park Avenue between Ohio Street and Michigan Street. Plan Commission recommends approval.
Move it.
Second?
Discussion. Seeing none, please take the roll.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Muglebauer,
Aye.
carried 5.
Resolution 23-401, appropriate Winnebago County Spirit ARPA funds for 2024 Fire Department turnout gear.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion. I didn't have that up here.
It's me.
Councilmember Buell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in response to the newspaper article today about the way that the funding is done, instead of being granted, it is now a reimbursement. Is that what I'm understanding, or how does that get paid to the city from the county? How does that all work now from the Spirit Fund?
we'll leave the finance, we kind of looked at each other as like he lost the coin toss.
Well, first of all, I didn't see the article this morning, so I have to apologize for that. Secondly, the direction we got from the county, and I know there's been some discussion at the county board level after we got this memo, was that we needed a resolution to identify a project, and that needs to be turned in with our application process. So staff has looked at potential projects that were on our ARPA list that we gave to you as part of our capital improvement planning process. So we identified the fire department turnout gear. So to answer a question about the article itself, I don't know. But this is the steps and our instructions that we got from the counties included in the packet along with the agreement. And the intent of the Spirit Fund, and we intend to follow that.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, if you'll take the roll on 23-401.
Eslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 5.
Resolution 23-402, approve amendment to 2023 operations budget to provide funding for the purchase of police department service weapons.
Move it.
So, second.
Any discussion? Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, question for Director Van Gompel. So this is already funds that were allocated for public safety, but we are, as we're legally obligated to do, approving a fund transfer for surplus personnel funds to go towards equipment, correct?
That is correct. Typically, we try to keep the personnel section segregated from the materials and supplies.
Yeah.
But in this case, the chief talked to me about using some unspent money on the personnel side. So that's why we're presenting this resolution for you to reappropriate or amend the budget, taking it out of personnel and moving it into material and supplies to pay for the need for the service weapons.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else, please take the roll.
Eslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 5.
Now we're on to council discussion, direction to city manager and future agenda items. First up, follow-up to the June 28th, 2023 budget workshop number 1, and direction to staff regarding special assessment relief options. This would be a time for us to discuss either one of those, whether it's a follow-up to the budget workshop and the CIP and debt, or special assessment relief options. Don't everybody jump.
I can get us started.
Councilmember
I've been
Ford.
talking about budgeting since 9 a.m. today, so I'll keep going. My preference would be in the total debt. I know that we talk a lot about the specific number, but I really like the idea of the percentage. And if our goal, as was stated in Long Range Finance Committee, sorry, Russ, if you're going to stand back up, but I believe 40%, correct, is our kind of our stated goal.
That's our goal for
So
2030.
I'm comfortable with there's movement around those overall numbers as long as we keep it that 40% of our debt capacity as a target. To me, that's the ratio is more important than the hard number because we're going to grow as a city. Things are going to change. The ratio is a better indicator.
Yeah, as far as issuance of debt, that was the direction from Long Range Finance and the city council to try to meet those goals. That's why as part of our capital improvement plan, we give you that model that shows what our future debt looks like. That model was based on another policy that council adopted at one point in time last year. I think they amended it to look at how much debt they're willing to take on. And in the past, it's been $18 million in general obligation debt. And if you're looking at the consideration that Mr. Robbie and Mr. Roloff is presenting to council, we're looking at $2 to $2.5 million of additional debt to finance a sidewalk program and to finance what we call a floor to assessment. So we are proposing that you would cover the first $5,000 of special assessments on residential property. And that would be $800,000 to $1 million, depending on the year. We are working on averages over the period of time that Mr. Robbie has looked at special assessments. So we've taken the approach of trying to pay for the first $5,000 moving forward.
Well, I'll be curious to hear from my colleagues on this. I know city staff totally disagrees with me here, but when we talk about equity, I still think the most inequitable thing we do is have these nightmare assessments, even if there's just a handful of them. I understand the importance of spreading the love around and the appeal of that floor, but I still think that the most inequitable thing we do is when government picks a couple people, even by accident, and prices them out of their homes. So I'll just say that. I have no idea if folks agree with me, but I continue to think that's very important.
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Do you have a proposal that would be different than the floor, or do you have an idea, or what your
if you really want to get into it, my
Please.
top proposal, I know we've talked about this before, is just getting rid of them all, right? And I think that we got an email from Councilmember Bulow about this. The idea of some combination, and this is an order that's my preferential order, some combination of the wheel tax using tax levy, specifically if we have new funding coming in for fire, police, and public utilities, that should free up some levy for other things. Some types of, I don't want to say cuts, but some type of looking at where we're spending our money right now, I think that needs to at least be discussed, reallocating existing funds and not assuming that any new funds going to offset special assessments is attached inherently to new debt. I think that needs to be an option, but that should be a final option. I also like the idea of if we did some type of cap, tying it to, I know we can't legally tie it to property values, but similar to what I think it was Mr. McGee was saying there, putting a hard cap on our assessments. I still like that idea, but I really like it if it's paired with something like taking sidewalks, as was proposed, off of the special assessment rolls, because then that is going to be improving efficiency within the organization, but also a way to hit those 2 points of equity that I think are really important, in that if we take sidewalks off, everybody's getting a benefit, and then we're also addressing these outlying assessments that are disproportionately impacting small numbers of people who have the misfortune of living on a corner or something where there's a project going on. And last but not least, one of the options that Mr. Robbie had given us about having the city take up a larger percentage, another way that we could do that as well. But these are just some of my thoughts. It's probably more than you wanted to hear from me, but I'm curious to hear about my colleagues.
Did you have any follow-up?
Go ahead. I'm sure I will.
Councilmember Ford actually hit on something that has been bugging me a little bit on this. So when we gave this as a goal, come to us with options. The options that were brought to us, I think they weren't as far-reaching as they could have been. I think that's fair. Because all this was the options presented to us were only about assuming more debt. It was just pay for it with debt, and that's just what we're going to give you. Councilmember Ford makes a good point. We should know, is there levy capacity? And if so, what would the implications of that be? Also, it would be, it's a tough thing to do, but, if we didn't want to increase and we didn't want to take on debt, is there things that we should be looking at paring back or using the cutting word? Those are things that we have to discuss. They're not the fun parts, but everything should be on the table. If this is something we want to try to achieve, then all options should be at least discussed and know the implications of it, so we're making a well-informed decision. So those are some of my thoughts. Councilmember Ford hit on it pretty quick there that, is there space within our levy or should we be looking at our current programming to see if there's, some areas for reallocating some of those funds to absorb some of this. Councilmember Buell is the only one up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So just to follow up, and I wanted to see where you're going to go and all that. I think that the proposal, that it's page 13, is the last page of the thing, that assumes, this was the math if we do the sidewalk costs covered and the first 5,000 paving floor. So not utilities and not the, extra stuff, but this was the plan and the reductions. For me, this is the bare minimum that we walk away with, just talking to the fellow counselors here. I will admit that the idea of, hey, get rid of them all and do I don't want to call it shotgun approach, but creative financing of, a little bit from here, a little bit from here, that wasn't my idea originally. But it was one that I really, really like. So just putting out there where I am, this is my floor that I'm interested in. I would love to see us go for broke, or not go for broke, but go for all of it and cover.
Bad choice of words.
Right? I would like to see us, go for being able to get rid of all of them, for the paving floor and the paving and the sidewalks. I think the sidewalks, Councilmember Ford hit on it, is a administrative nightmare, and that has to be rolled into any adjustment that we do of getting that taken care of, because what we're doing now is not sustainable, sending out $10 bills and that kind of crap. So, but that's where I'm at.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks. Ditto. For the sake of direction to staff, I think I agree the 5,000 floor plus sidewalk replacement, it would be kind of my second option. First option, I mean, I think we should at least entertain kind of this like buffet of funding approach. What could it look like for us to replace, completely replace assessments? So I am supportive of us going in that direction and kind of see where it goes.
Councilmember Esler.
Thank you, Mayor. While I love buffets, I'm not in favor of this one. I guess, you know, former Councilmember McGee came up and said very eloquently, the poor saps that had to pay this in the past, and that's kind of why we're changing it, because it's a large expenditure. You know, I said I'd be in favor of something that's reasonable, and I want to thank whoever came up with this, the floor plan and, you know, the $5,000. I think, while it may not be perfect, I think it's a very good, reasonable, equitable thing to do, where they're not going to get hit with so much, you know, the 12,000 now becomes 7. Well, that's still a lot of money. That's a little more reasonable than 12. And I think the people that did have most of the assessments, or, you know, had to pay the large assessments, they can understand. They didn't like it, and the costs have doubled in the last, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. So we do have that issue. Under no circumstances will I ever vote in favor of a wheel tax. People that have multiple cars get hit with that, and you can only drive one car at a time. You're paying for 2, 3, 4, however cars you have. Businesses can get around that. I think as the staff said, you can have cars in different communities to get around that. So, but I do have one question, Mr. Roloff. With this floor, essentially then, we're not changing the percentages of the person paying, the split of the remainder. That remains the same, correct?
Yeah, the way it was proposed by staff was you still keep the third, but when that's all calculated, then you take 5,000 off of that assessment to get to that number. So it's, it's not exactly what Mr. McGee was advocating, but he was
No,
advocating.
I know he had a different proposal.
You his suggestion in general was take a bite out of it. Now, the truth is that the buying power of a $5,000 floor in 2023 is going to be different than $5,000 in 2030. So, to Mr. McGee's point, you got to come back and revisit this thing. And even the wheel tax, whether you agree or disagree with it, the buying power of that is going to be identical unless we have a spike in the number of vehicles we have in town, and I would submit to you, we'd have a reduction in the number of vehicles. But the buying power goes away, and that's just a challenge that every community that's doing the wheel taxes is kind of wrestling with that. And I know James wants me to say vehicle registration fee, because that's the technical term, but I was deferring to Councilmember Esslinger, but that buying power is a challenge with that. So whether it's a subsidy with a floor or an offset in the buffet line with a vehicle registration fee, the buying power doesn't last forever.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Beal, go ahead and I'll follow.
You sure?
Absolutely.
Okay, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
No, the only thing I was gonna say is, this current council can't fix problems that lasted 10 years ago or occurred 10 years ago with the assessments, and I don't presume that we can fix the ones that are gonna happen 10, 15 years from now. You know, that's gonna be their current council. What we can do is take a look at the wisest decision we can make today.
I think the thing that bugs me a little bit is we can't just assume that debt pays for this. Given we've got other constraints, it's appropriate that this is timed with the budget workshop follow-up. And we have debt projections. Councilmember Ford, indicated, looking towards a certain percentage of debt, as we go forward. We're trying to achieve some things here. And if the default is to throw it to debt, we actually don't gain here. all we're doing is just, and we're actually driving up the cost over the lifespan of the notes, costing even more. Having an alternate funding source, for me, is really important. That whether it's, a modest amount on the levy, a modest amount, it could be a modest amount within debt. That might be appropriate, but that multiple sources, I think maybe what I'm looking for is everything in moderation, to ensure that all properties are paying into this. One of the things we've looked at, and as Councilmember Esslinger even mentioned, a vehicle registration fee. Businesses are most businesses, especially large ones, that won't apply to, or maybe, institutional properties won't, that won't apply to as well, maybe, or not as much. And it's important that those properties pay their fair share as well. So that's why I think putting some of this towards the levy, or using some levy dollars, is important to me. If we're going to use it, if we're going to go that route, it can't just be all debt for me. And I know I'm kind of beating the horse on that one, but I don't think the discussion's over here. I think there has been some direction. I think,
Yeah.
in terms of some ideas that some would like. Councilmember Ford, it's all yours.
I can attempt to try to sum it up, and you can all tell me if I got it wrong. What I'm hearing here is that people are okay with this $5,000 floor concept. People want to get rid of the sidewalks, and people want to see diverse options of funding sources for this. As much as I want to say people are in favor of the cap, I don't think they are. So I'll shut up about that one, but I got those nest eggs in. I mean, is that accurate? If other folks have other opinions, please share, but for sake of giving them some direction.
You're in the ballpark, yeah.
Yeah, I'll, my preference would be, we cover all of it, but if that's not reasonable, and, I'd need to see the math before we can definitely say yes or no, where that gets paid for. The $5,000 floor and sidewalks, I think, is a really, really good first step.
Mark, Russ, you have some guidance, you have questions for us to clarify?
I'm going in to do my mid-year review, and I'm just I'm looking at the 2023 goals, and number 5 was this topic: work to address inequities and special assessments, providing the common council options with cost estimates and legal feedback. There was kind of and I'm going to defer to the 3 folks in the middle who helped put this together. Part of what we talked about was the uncertainty over a transportation utility fee. That was part of the motivation. It was leaving it a little more open-ended. And the vehicle registration fee, part of that was, it's not that it was completely ruled out, but it wasn't, at the time council was talking about this, and I've kind of gotten on board with that a little bit, some of the inequities that are built into the vehicle registration fee. But each discussion creates more dialogue and more ideas. The buffet suggestion, I mean, thinking of it that way. My response to Councilmember Beulah was that, that would leave us about, and I just used an example of a $25 fee. I just kind of picked it because it kind of cut the gap in half. And then, but I did say use levy or borrowing, and you're just like, don't know if I can wrap my arms around that one. I mean, there's other things we can look at. You can actually, you don't have to solve this all in one day. You could keep this as 2024 phase 2. It's like, all right, you choose the floor and you choose the sidewalks, and then it's like, okay, now what else can we do? That kind of addresses what Mr. McGee talked about. He wants to see a little bit of, gradual nature to this. And he had one suggestion, and there's other ways we could do that too, but his suggestion was gonna cost more borrowing. And I'm not hearing that there's a unanimity that the solution is always debt. We were looking at the alternatives like these ones without talking about VRF. We haven't ruled it out, it's just that council had kind of semi-ruled it out. And I'm not gonna say you ruled it out, we just didn't bring it back because, and maybe I should have for the new council members, it's like, there's other options out there. The transportation utility fee, the Buchanan Watt staircase, but our fee wasn't really based like Buchanan. I'm really curious as what happens with the Pewaukee case, to see what happens there. Lynn's not as optimistic as I am because of some of the ways it was written, and I have to defer to her on that. I don't know. I'm still holding hope that the Pewaukee case, but then, is that what you want to do? You're going to have the business community just come banging down the doors on you. So maybe you just solve part of it and visit it another day. That's certainly an option for you.
Councilmember Bulow.
The only point I wanted to make is if we do VRF at all, I want it to be a small portion of the solution. That's the, dessert of the buffet line or even salad bar, whatever. I don't want to see at any point where that would be the bulk of the funding, but it could be a small portion of it.
Okay. The reason for myself, and if you don't mind, I'll go first, and then the floor is yours. With the increase in shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin, and that being in perpetuity, I look at that as it's a once in generational movement from Madison and legislature in terms of funding local government. And that those funds will be coming in to the tune of almost $2 million. And knowing that those need to be accounted for with public safety, police, fire, public works. That's where my interest, that's why I talk about a little bit of levy support, because those additional funds coming in clears that up. And that's, I think it's appropriate to at least, the timing of it is very interesting, it's helpful. It doesn't mean that all, 100% of that extra that has to go to this, but I think it could be a part of it. Finance Director.
And I was going to kind of go down that same path, but just probably a little different approach. With the increase in shared revenue, there are some commitments that cities and municipalities have to make back, in that we maintain our level of effort in public safety. This will be a preview of my budget presentation. We're in a service industry, and we're providing services to our residents, and we don't produce widgets, and that means people. And if you take this proposal and looking at it as, being costing of $2 or $2.5 million a year, it doesn't have to be all debt, but if you put it on levy, the only real way to get significant savings is impacting the number of people we have working within the organization. And there are going to be limitations put on the city through this increased shared revenue, that we still have to maintain that level of effort for public safety. So that means it would fall under non-public safety issues. And I can tell you, in my years of assisting you in finance, that each year at budget time, and we saw this last year and we've seen it year after year, is I think our staff is stretched, and I don't mean to chime in for the city manager, but our staff is stretched pretty thin right now, to be honest with you. The notion of cutting employees to help pay for road improvements, I think is going to be kind of difficult for you to get your hands around as elected leaders. I'm just giving you my advice as a financial person and sharing with you some of those things. Now, on its face, an extra $1.9 million looks really good. I would assume that some residents are going to be wanting to see a reduction in tax levies for next year. That's going to be your separate call at another date and another time. But when we start looking at our personnel costs and the cost of people and benefits, and especially in the lines of public safety, that's going to take a big chunk of that additional shared revenue. And you're going to be surprised when I start looking at our cost of employees and the cost of providing compensation and the cost of benefits. While they may not be increasing as fast as some of the inflationary rates in our economy, we're going to have some heavy pressure on that. So to kind of say we could take half of our shared revenue and put it towards streets, I don't know if that's a good analogy to look at or consider at this point in time, because I think a lot of that's going to be consumed with adjustments and with maintaining our staffing levels that we have right now. I'm just giving you a prelude. Again, I apologize if I stepped on the city manager's toes, but I've been in his shoes before. And I'm just trying to give you some advice on how we move forward. And you're right, it's going to be not something we solve today, but it's going to be a continued discussion as we move forward, but it's not going to be an easy decision.
Thank you for that candor.
One of the points that the mayor made, and, we've had this discussion a zillion times, actually. We just, maybe not those exact words, but we've been wrestling with this when we get shared revenue relief. And one of the things I wrote to Councilmember Bulow that I blind copied you on, it would, while with police and fire covered, if we just say that 1.92 million will cover police and fire, that's still a good thing, because that would free up a property tax increase. We've typically had to rely on property taxes exclusively for police and fire. So even if you just mathematically said, well, that'll cover an increase for police and fire, and we're guessing it's going to be close. So, but that frees you up to say, all right, what options do we have with the property tax levy, which I think is kind of where you were going. It's like, okay, we don't have to say it's shared revenues paying for it, because it won't be, but will shared revenue provide the needed relief that you're looking for to kick around different options? And that'll be the tough decision you'll end up having to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well said, City Manager Roloff. I mean, I've been here 3 years and been following this. I mean, we increase our public safety budget every year. That's the bulk of our increase. We get requests for new positions, and we generally fund them. And that's before we had a new shared revenue source that's directly for that. So I do think that I was with the mayor in not suggesting that we take this new money and throw it into roads, but rather this is going to free up some other levy money that we might, reasonably use to offset some of this financial burden.
Well, it's a good discussion, probably one of the better ones we've had in a while on this particular topic. It's not going to get solved tonight. I think you got some more information from us, at least in terms of where we might like to be going. If you could circle back on some of those things, provide a little bit more information to allow us to continue this. I suspect maybe not the next meeting, but maybe the second in August.
Or even the budget work session at the end of August.
Yep, at one of those, it gets put on the agenda for continued discussion if council needs to, keep the discussion going.
I appreciate the feedback, little emails like that, hey, I'm wondering about this. Keep them coming, because we'll circle back and try to take a look at this. I'm hearing the sidewalk and the floor thing seem to be, that's
A starting point.
a starting point, yeah, it's a great way to put it. So we'll work on the other stuff, and, I'm gonna listen to Mr. McGee's comments and kind of take those things into consideration as well, so thank you.
Appreciate it. Future agenda items and/or future workshops. I don't have anything there. On to report of council liaison for boards and commissions. Anybody have anything that they'd like to share? Seeing none. City Manager Roloff, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have two memos in the packet relating to 2024 capital improvements, really just getting started on it for Mr. Robbie's staff. Environmental services, geotechnical, subsurface exploration, that's what we do to get ready for our design work, as well as environmental review services during the capital improvement program. And that's just sort of a place where we can, if an environmental question comes up, we send Robert E. Lee out to do it. And then I have outstanding issues, happy to answer any questions you may have about that.
Seeing none, I believe Deputy Mayor has a motion for us.
I, excuse me, move following the adjournment of this meeting, the Common Council may convene into closed session to discuss the mid-year review of the city manager, an employee over which the Common Council has jurisdiction, and exercises responsibility pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1C of the Wisconsin State Statutes.
Second.
Any discussion? So please take the roll on going into closed session.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 5.
Now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.